David, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks, Scott. So is this actually streaming live or no?
This is actually streaming live. We're going to Facebook, YouTube. So there's
Whoa.
probably just millions of people that are watching, waiting with bated breath.
I know, for us to make a misstep. But
I mean,
anyway,
is there anything we have that's not been said? It's interesting because we're like we're 2 weeks out. We can have 2 weeks.
Let's see, November 5th. November 5th.
So we're 13 days.
November, yeah, almost 2 weeks.
So we're 2 weeks away from what is culturally, I think, being perceived as a bombshell. I mean, there are women who say they're not going to have sex, like cisgendered heterosexual women that say they're not going to have sex with men anymore. That, there are people on the right that think this is akin to the return of Christ almost. I mean, that this is such a breakthrough, the re-election of Donald J. Trump. You are a Trump commentator. You've written, for my money, the book to read on Trump. How are you assessing this reality? You're in Seattle. You're in, blue country.
Yeah.
What do you make of all this?
I know. I think I appreciate the question. I'm so overwhelmed by all these questions. I wish I had some simple take. I think that's a lot of the ways in which people, quote, brand themselves. They're far right, or they're libertarian, or they're I don't know, even aggressively centrist in this sort of boring kind of David Brooksian way, even though he's not truly a centrist. Or you're a far left person and you write a column that says we're like a Timothy Snyder position, which is this is the beginning of tyranny, and the resistance starts now. And I don't know what it is. I mean, it's kind of a boring thing to say, but I'm trying to figure it out. I read everything from Bret Stephens to Ross Douthat to Roxane Gay to Timothy Snyder to Michelle Goldberg. I guess all these people are in the Times, but the Times almost has become this weird clearinghouse of positions. They just throw all these positions up there. And then, you probably have a wider net than I do, in the sense that you're kind of plugged into right-wing social media, or, separately Christian social media. I mean, I wish I had some incendiary take, but I'm trying to figure out what to do next, other than say, I told you so. I mean, I wrote this book in 2018. I think that's the book of mine that you liked the most.
That was the first time we ever talked. Was that?
Woohoo!
Was around that book,
I know we tend to idealize our friendship, but it's idealizable. I mean, it's so cool. And it's not like you're some, I don't know, that we called our book together, which just got published. I think it's available now, not only as an audiobook and as an ebook, but I think the publisher Doug Lane of Sublation Media is now reissuing it as a short paperback. This is a book that you and I co-wrote called A Christian Existentialist and a Psychoanalytic Atheist Walk into a Trump Rally, which I think is one of the coolest titles ever. Almost everybody laughs when they hear the title. And
we could actually do this in person, it looks like now, because we will probably have many more rallies to go, right? I mean, this is
I mean, in a way, the most interesting. I'm working. My friend James Nugent, who's the film editor of two films I've done, Lynch: A History and How We Got Here, and he's far more than a film editor. He's really a co-collaborator, co-creator, just as in many ways you are a co-collaborator, co-creator of the earlier book called How We Got Here, Melville plus Nietzsche divided by square root of Alan Bloom times Zizek squared equals Bannon. I mean, that book grew directly out of not only the companion film, but also indeed out of this 10 hours of intensive conversation that you and I had during COVID. At the end of both of us had gotten divorced, and amidst COVID. And for some reason,
those were
we
dark
did these
times.
10.
Yeah, that was a very dark,
really
struggling.
Now, of course, I'm Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky, and you're Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky. moving to Rochester. You're becoming the Earl of Rochester.
I like that. I like that.
But anyway, I'm blathering, doing a little self-promotion. But the big thing that I found the most interesting, and James Nugent and I have been trading emails. He and I are going to do a post-Thanksgiving conversation just to me, the most interesting thing he said, and this rang true to me. He said something like, I feel guilty that I'm looking forward to the shit show. Basically that basically, you know, he's pretty far left, probably farther left than I am. He's a really bright guy, extremely well read. But he basically said, if I'm honest, you know, I'm terrified of Trump, all that stuff. But he said, if I'm being super honest, I'm looking forward to the carnival of it. And to me, I felt that 100% and still feel it 100%. It's just interesting. Train wrecks are more interesting, or car wrecks. I mean, to me, it's such a cliche, but somebody gets in a car wreck on the side of the road. It's such a bizarre thing. It stops traffic over the next hour because everyone has to look, hoping someone has died inside the car. It's so weird. And I do think what James said isn't only, I mean, I felt that he basically beat me to the punch, but on the night of the election, I felt some weird, giddy force in me. It was very strange. I'm curious if you feel any of that. It's a horrible thing to say for somebody, but I think it's a key, like, who cares what I think or you think or James thinks, but I think it's key to understand why Trump was elected. He's like, Kamala Harris is one of the most boring people to occupy the planet. I mean, there is nothing interesting about her. She is so, what do they call it? Vetted and, you know, committee vetted. I mean, she is so predictable, so robotic. When she went on
even,
Charlemagne,
I mean, the ultimate example of this, I think, what you're talking about, was when she was on Oprah and she was saying that she owned a gun. And then she said,
then she backtracked.
She said, if somebody comes into my house, breaks in my house, they're getting shot. And then she quickly said, oh, I shouldn't have said that. My staff's going to wrangle me afterwards. It was this false sort of, like, the whole thing seemed staged. It's
a good point.
The statement, and then the retraction, and then the fear of her staff. It all seemed like a canned.
Oh, I see. You thought
response.
Even that was canned. Yeah, you think that was planned?
Well, I mean, it just, the whole thing, whether or not it was, it seemed, because I think it just seemed inauthentic.
Well, I mean, what's worse is if they told her, say the thing about the gun, and then she saw the look in Oprah's eyes, and so she backtracked. I mean, just think of the genius. I mean, I'm no political scientist. I'm no historian. I feel like I'm pretty good at reading performance art, and I'm pretty good at trying to read
cultural tea leaves.
Yeah, but specifically the performance of a personality in public. You know, as you may have heard, I'm the only authentic human being in America left. I'm never performing a character. You know, I'm never performing David Shields, but you are performing Scott Kent Jones. And basically, what's the point? Trump does that whole thing on the garbage truck. You know, he turns Biden calling them garbage. He makes it a visual metaphor. Kamala says she worked at McDonald's for 2 seconds when she was 18 in Oakland. So he serves fries at, you know, the Western PA McDonald's. He understands that
Didn't she kind of say this McDonald's stuff like she stormed the beaches at Anzio or something? It was kind of, you know, he was kind of, yeah, he worked.
You mean like I'm a working class girl because that one parent's a professor, the other person is a social worker, but to get through one summer in high school, I served a few Big Macs. You mean, is that your point?
Yeah, I worked at McDonald's. I mean,
so did I. I worked at McDonald's. Got fired for, they said that I didn't clean up the parking lot well enough. I got fired in 6 weeks. Don't know if that qualifies me for.
Oh yeah, that you could run for president with that sort of, yeah.
Tell me what you think of James's thing. It's not exactly a new idea. I feel like Trump book 1, Trump book 2, and Trump book 3 triple down on that idea, which is, I think it's kind of over maybe, but Trump, he's a profoundly performative and visual person who understands that we are dumb as hell and that we are Americans who want the carnival, the spectacle. And I just think people voted for Trump because it'll be entertaining, even if like the country goes to hell, which it will, I think.
Well,
Do you?
I think that James Nugent here is onto something. In this goes back to Todd McGowan stuff and
Yeah,
desire and
totally.
politics, and so it's very easy. I think that, and Todd has done this, our mutual friend, so well,
I don't know if you can
identifying.
explain, or does everyone on your show know who Todd is? Or
Todd has been on the podcast, and I can put a link in the show notes to the previous appearance. A great guy, University of Vermont, and he writes about a lot about Hegel and psychoanalytic stuff and film and movies. But he has this. He writes a lot about desire, I guess, in the Lacanian sense. You would know more
and
about this.
lack and excess. He's just so good on lack and excess.
Yeah, and basically this, this concept of this desire, this thing, the guilty pleasure, the thing that is bad for you, and yet existentially you love it, and it's deleterious, and that's easy to see in the Trump supporter, right? Which Todd has talked about. They know he's lying to them, but it's part of the fun. It's the wink, wink, wink. We're all in this enjoyment, this Lacanian enjoyment. But I think what James Nugent is identifying is it's not just the Trump supporters. There's desire, there's enjoyment in the people that are Trump deriders and people. That are
I mean, I didn't vote for Trump. James didn't vote for Trump. Our vote doesn't matter in state of Washington.
I didn't vote for Trump either, but it didn't help in Pennsylvania.
Oh, that's true.
You won Pennsylvania despite my.
Could you have? I mean, that our friend Sean Corman, who I did the WWE thing with, very smart guy. He's a wrestling promoter. I did a Q&A with him, and we talked about how it's not just a broad sense of WWE informing Trump's every move, but every single move during the election came out of WWE rhetoric and grammar. But Sean, who lives in Western Mass, I think, he just said, it's over. There's no way Trump isn't going to win, because even in very blue Massachusetts, and I forget what town Sean lives in, but it's not Cambridge, somewhere in sort of central or western Massachusetts, he was seeing a lot of Trump signs. So he said he's sort of a good prognosticator. He predicted Trump would win in 2016, and posted stuff on social media weeks before the election, is just kicking himself that he didn't bet a lot of money on it. But could you have predicted, Scott? Could you read the tea leaves in Pennsylvania vis-a-vis Trump winning? Because I have a good story about Pennsylvania that kind of explains it.
I mean, look, it didn't. Philadelphia is very different. Like, I live in the city, and so there aren't. I mean, there are Republicans in the city, obviously, the Republicans everywhere. But this, I remember when in 2012, there were entire precincts where no one voted for Romney, and people said there's corruption. I said, no, it's not. You just never been to North Philadelphia. I mean,
Trump, I think Philly is about as blue as it gets, because heavily African American, heavily union or blue collar. I mean, that's a whole question.
But I did something that gave me pause. I talked to at least, I'm going to say conservatively, at least a dozen Black voters under 45. Some of them I was close to, some of them just acquaintances, but just
this time around, you're saying
this time around, and all of them, I had so many of them where a dozen or so acquaintances all said the same thing, that basically, I don't know her. What's she ever done? I don't know who she is. I think things were better, had more money with Trump. And then a number of them mentioned the trans stuff and what's up with the trans stuff. Because, in Philadelphia on Serial Loop was this ad where, Juan, who is some kind of murderer, or, whatever, he's a multiple felon. Juan became Juanita in jail. I mean, of course, I'm making up names here, but, and the before and after pictures, and this is what Kamala supports, that was on a loop just all the time. You couldn't watch the Eagles game without seeing it over and over and over. And that branding was effective. And so that's, these are Black voters in the city, and they were,
you can imagine
the enthusiasm gap was low. So you can imagine you go an hour west of Center City,
Forget it.
Philadelphia. Yeah,
30
it didn't.
minutes west and it's over. Yeah. I think the story I have is quite similar. Our mutual friend Michael Wheaton lives now in Easton, PA, just on the New Jersey border between. It's about an hour and a half away from New York City.
I have
Just over the
preached the
border.
gospel in Easton, PA. I have.
I know. We got to tell. I mean,
I've been there, man.
There was a lot of little people were looking for you there. They say that you owe them money or something. I don't know what that was about.
Probably.
But Michael Wheaton, who's a publisher of a wonderful press called Autofocus, is publishing my forthcoming book in 2026 called Failure is the Only Subject, which we could almost do a thing on that, sort of vis-a-vis Trump, that title. But anyway, I spent about a week across the street. I stayed at a hotel down the street from Michael's house, and Michael and I worked on the manuscript. And he, in Easton, as you know, Scott, is basically a college town. Lafayette College is right there.
Yeah, beautiful little school, yeah.
Yeah, and that, various dignitaries have visited there, like John Updike. He visited, gave a reading, and he stayed at the Lafayette Inn where I had stayed, and, various people. And it seems like a cozy little college town, and I felt like I could be anywhere in America, like Iowa City, Iowa, or Ann Arbor, Michigan, or Mount Holyoke. It just felt like every college town across America, especially maybe in the Northeast. But boy, Michael and I and his wife and 2 kids would travel like a mile out of this little enclave. And suddenly, it's not like crime, but suddenly the Trump signs are there. So Michael said, "Oh, this is great. Easton's great. I feel like I'm with like-minded people." But boy, if we walked like 16 blocks away, the whole vibe was very different. And I felt like at that point I should have bet my money on Trump, because Kamala had to win Pennsylvania. And I could just feel it in my body that in tiny enclaves, maybe parts of Pittsburgh, all of Philly, Lafayette College, and that's it. So anyway, I thought that was an interesting.
Yeah. And let me throw you something I heard this morning too, or I think I heard it this morning. These stats and poll numbers fascinated me.
I know you really do the poll numbers.
In a Marist poll of registered voters, it was done this year by NPR. On behalf of NPR, 57% of Latinos agreed that all illegal immigrants should be deported, and the number was still only slightly less for Black Americans. Well over 50% of Black Americans thought all illegal immigrants should be deported. When it comes to voter ID requirements, right? Which, if you mention voter ID to progressive activists, this is akin to Bull Connor, and you're just pulling out dogs and hoses, and this is so on voter ID. This is from Pew. This is not a right-wing Fox push poll. Okay?
No, Pew is, I think, NPR.
The gold standard. Yeah. 75% of Blacks, 81% of whites, 84% of Asians, and 85% of all Hispanics want mandatory voter ID laws. And now let me give you one more Pew.
There's so many ways to interpret it, which, we may or not be the right demographic to interpret it, but
one more. This is another Pew research fact right here, stat. The Supreme Court decision overturning race-based affirmative action, right? According to Gallup, I'm sorry, this is Gallup, not Pew. Again, pretty reliable polling agency.
Gallup leans slightly right, but not terribly much. But anyway.
52% of Blacks, 63% of Asians, 68% of Hispanics, and 72% of whites approve the Supreme Court ban on a ban or partial ban on race-based affirmative action. 52% of Blacks. I mean, so this is just, if you're an NPR liberal, these are just sort of staple issues. I mean, this is like the Nicene Creed or something for Christians, right? Voter ID, affirmative action, all this. I mean, these are things that just most of the country and most of the non-white country is saying that the left is out of step with. And so, in some sense, right,
Right.
Trump just threw down the ideological gauntlet and said, "Hey, there's a cultural war and divide, and I'm against these NPR. I'm against these people with their tawny little coffee shops, and I eat at McDonald's, and Kennedy, there was just a picture on the plane, and he's with Don Jr. and Elon, and they're all eating McDonald's. Kennedy, who has said McDonald's is poison, he's got to sit there and eat the Big Mac. I mean, it's just a big screw you to. I mean, I remember that line you quoted by FDR where he said when he was thinking about packing the court, "I welcome their hatred." I mean, this is Trump, right? I mean, he's welcoming the liberal tears. I mean, he's just, and
Yeah.
everything is. I mean, it's, hey, you guys think I'm bad now. I'm going to take the vaccine denier. I'm going to put him the HHS. I'm going to take Matt Gaetz, who's got all 3 years of experience with a life. This guy's statutory rape accusations. He's going to be the attorney. I mean, you couldn't write. Sacha Baron Cohen couldn't write a funnier. I mean, this is all so just
and it's
fantastically in your face.
It's hugely intentional. Like when it's. I mean, it is. I mean, again, it doesn't need me to unpack it, but it's as if Trump thinks of what the department stands for, and he consciously, with great intentionality, he chooses someone who in the cultural matrix represents the antithesis. And it's not like some random thing like, oh my God, Matt Gaetz, he has all these legal charges against him. Let's make him attorney general. Trump understands the perverse comedy of it, I think, either on some intuitive level or his advisors like Bannon. It's hard not to think of Bannon behind a lot of these. It's a willful choice to think of, like, the energy secretary is some guy who's like fracked the hell out of all of North Dakota or whatever it is. And it's like I'm trying to think of what, it'd be like, I don't know. It's and then it hugely depends, as you would say, on liberal tiers, in the sense that it's crucial to get the burn of, and I think it's even wrong to call NPR left, because it's like, it's hugely kind of pseudo-centrist now. I mean, it doesn't even represent any kind of real left position. But to me, that the thing to understand about Trump, for me, I don't know, I'm still trying to understand it after 3 books and 1 movie, is just he purposely is choosing somebody who is a comic inversion of the acceptable norm. And it's crucial to his whole branding that he violates the norm. And then it's crucial to the branding that the left, or pseudo left, the media center left, the academic left, rise up like, oh my God, how could this be?
Yes.
That's the orgasm, is when, and it's like a big tell about Trump is that he often says, I'm not supposed to say this, comma, but, and
Absolutely.
that builds in the lack and excess. Here's what you're not supposed to say. That's what people like Kamala Harris do. Just think of how she does exactly the opposite. She finally says something semi-interesting, like, hey man, I own a Glock. I'm this badass from Oakland. It's like, okay, bring it on. And then she does exactly the opposite. Instead of owning it, as it were, and just like saying, and here's this video of me shooting an intruder, and I'm really, I happen to, like, I actually don't agree with, like, I don't think anyone should own a gun except someone who's going to be attacked by a bear or something, but that's separate. But she actually did a good, and then she backs it the other way. Just think of how utterly different that is from Trump, who says something like, I'm not supposed to say, blowjob, but on TV, but then he says it, and then
Absolutely.
I mean, it's I tend to think of it as all hugely cultural theater. I just do. Like, how else to explain people? And everyone quotes this thing that that Roy Cohn taught him. Never apologize, never explain, never ask for love, always declare victory no matter what happens. And then there's one other thing I forget, but he and then he sort of married that to Howard Stern and insult comedy, and that he's he has it down to a virtual science, and you can see people like Corey Lewandowski and various people, no matter what you're asked, come back with a very aggressive question. I feel it seemed like you and I texted back and forth in which we said, how does Trump know that? What was it? Someone was asking him a question and he said, no, but you are very rude to answer. Wasn't it you? I was straight. Tell me what that was, Scott.
I forget, but it's a very rude question. He always does that though. He will fall, he'll fall on a fence.
Yeah.
And he's dying to answer the question. He's dying to answer the question, right? He's not really offended.
No, as if you weren't like incredibly rude. Let me see if I can find that. But anyway, it doesn't matter. I think the challenge for him and we're just scratching the surface here, but it's one thing to campaign that way. I think, he is or was, very, very gifted public performer. I think it's on the decline with age and people understand the shtick, blah, blah, blah. It'll be interesting how governing works, where he's told people just structure every day as a moment of reality TV in which I win the day. That's something he told campaigns or presidential staff in 2016 to 2020, where each day should have a reality TV theme, and at the end of the day, he'll end up winning. And then in a way, he governs almost like it's still campaigning. I have where do you fall on the whole, Trump is a fascist, he's going to become authoritarian? If you had to ask me, gun to the head, as they say, I would say he doesn't care enough. He doesn't have the will. He basically just loves owning liberal tiers. Does he have a truly fascistic drive? I might be terribly naive, and maybe I'm getting it wrong, but I think he just loves the performance.
Yeah, I'm with you. I don't think he's going to existential depth to have. Yeah, I don't. That you. I'm reading a book right now about. I forget the author's name, but it's called Strong Man.
Oh,
from
is that by
Mussolini to the present? And,
isn't that Anna Applebaum or no?
No, it's not Anna Applebaum. I forget. I've never heard of the woman. A friend sent it to me, and she's a historian. It's good, but I mean, it's
right.
But there's a stark difference between the figures mentioned. She does mention Trump at times, but I mean, I don't think he has the kind of Herculean will, like you're saying. I mean, there's just not. But I do think, I want to get back to something though. This admission that you and James Nugent have, that this sort of guilty pleasure.
I hope James isn't mad at me.
No, I think
I'll have to tell James we were on the podcast. But anyway,
but that's such a great admission though, and I wonder how many people secretly feel it, but you couldn't say, like you're at some party in Seattle, right, and a holiday party or something, right? And what do you think, if you said this, you're with a group of folks that are, all of them have, at least a bachelor's degree. Many of them have more. I mean, what do you think would be the reaction if you said that? If you just said, what, I didn't vote for him, but I have this real perverse sense of, I want to watch the car wreck. I mean, and in some sense, I'm happy. What do you think? What kind of response do you think that would elicit?
It's a really good question, and I feel like a bit of a hypocrite depending on whom I'm speaking to. I think it's one of the things I value about our friendship is that I tend to be pretty honest with you, and I can own everything from, far left paranoia to almost quasi-rightist, I don't know, questioning of, sort of woke PC stuff or whatever. And so I think I was on a podcast that night with Doug Lane, who's publisher of my last two books, who runs this pretty good YouTube channel. And I think that you saw this one thing that he did. Anyway, Doug was doing an election night streaming thing on his sublation thing, and he was having on various people whom he's published, I think. And I was talking to him between, I think, 5 and 6 on the West Coast, or no, 8 and 9 on the West Coast, when it was virtually over. And if I'm honest, I had this weird, I don't know, it'd be interesting to go back and look at the video, but I had this weird enchantment in my body. I was sort of giddy, like I was on some drug. And, I was watching it at home with my girlfriend, Lucy, whom you know a bit. And she's, and we were also with this other young woman who was at the house who's here. And, they're like super far left and super ugly. In a way, it's my curse and my blessing. I have just terrible detachment toward human endeavors. Like there's a line by Graham Greene that every writer has a chip of ice in his heart. And I think, in a good way and a bad way, I have that chip of ice. Like I kind of just view everything, I think, through, I don't know what you call it, a lens of whatever you call it, anthropology, or just I'm a bit of a student, and I just like it's just interesting. And part of it is that these two books I've written, you know, and I don't do I truly worry about the fate of the Republic? Somewhat. And then I felt like with, say, Lucy and Maria, I was sort of being like, oh yeah, I'm so worried. But then when I was talking to Doug, and I was on this podcast, I was like, this is this is fucking interesting because I'm really confused. I don't get it. Like a week before, I'd have guessed Kamala would have eked out a victory. So I'm not a very good prognosticator. And then I don't know how well I'm answering your question, other than I felt it in my body really strongly. Like I felt almost embarrassed being on Doug's podcast because I was sort of giddy. And I was like, this is just bizarre because we now have 4 more years, I guess, of this guy. And, I'm still trying to understand how it happened. And, I'm not Tim Snyder. I'm not Ann Applebaum. I'm just trying to understand it. And it's just so damn interesting. And I think in a way, I'm like a lot of voters who voted for him. And I think something I wrote to James that I really understand resentment and bitterness. I'm not sure why, but it's what, the fancy French term for this is ressentiment, where Nietzsche's underground man who just hates the powers that be. I don't know. There's something in me. I don't know if it's like a West Coast, East Coast thing, or as I get older, I feel more disconnected to the culture, or that my books are being published by smaller presses, or that as a kid, I grew up with a horrible stutter, or even being Jewish in like Christian culture, or something in my temperament that's very deeply um, it's sort of that wonderful line from Brando's, from the Brando film, The Wild Man, or something it's called, or they go, what are you rebelling against? And Brando says, what do you got? It's like, I just love that line. Like, I've got a lot of fuck you-ism in me. Like, I don't want to be told what to think or what to say or what to do. And so many of the cultural icons, like your big girlfriend there in Philly, Terry Gross, I can't stand her. She drives me utterly insane as this voice of mid-cult liberal intelligentsia who condescends to everything that isn't pre-approved by the shrink-wrapped ideology of acceptable culture. I hate that stuff so powerfully. And I don't know. And I think like I can tap into that resentment pretty powerfully. And some of my books explore it, like Trouble with Men. And I think, if I'm honest, I'm not a Trump voter, but I do think Trump taps into something in the human being that's lost, that's broken, that's wounded.
Especially with men. Especially with men.
It's a good point.
Yeah, with men, I think there's something about the Elon Musk figures, the Joe Rogans,
Yeah.
these figures that channel something that guys, I think, feel that there's there no I this sounds I sound so I sound like I'm on Fox News or something, right? But there's this perceived kind of the war on manhood, right?
Yeah.
That you've got to be gelded. That if you're a gelded
Yeah.
guy, you're okay.
Yeah.
That if you're someone that, if your testosterone level is any higher than Anderson Cooper, that you're something, you're really a problem, and you're toxically masculine, and you probably need to be under observation, and it ought to be sort of institutionalized or something. And of course that's hyperbolic, but I think that what you're saying, this ressentiment, by the way, that Nietzsche thinks undergirds early Christianity, and I don't think he's completely wrong in
Wow.
that.
Nietzsche,
Um,
did that guy ever get anything wrong? I
no.
worship him so deeply. And then,
I often think it must be so lonely if you're Nietzsche to be so right about so many things so early.
oh my God,
Now it's almost passe. Everything so right.
exactly, exactly.
It's why it's not interesting. It's much more interesting, I think, to teach undergrads Plato than it is to teach them Nietzsche, because Plato is so otherworldly, right? At least you have to like get them into something they can't relate to. Whereas Nietzsche, it's just he's the perspectivalism, everything about it. It's just he's
Yeah,
just completely won the day.
totally. Except that, yeah, well, but anyway, that's a complicated issue where he's hugely misunderstood. But in any
Absolutely.
case, I do think the Anderson Cooper point is a really good one. I don't know if anything I said surprises you, that you know my work well enough to know how much it's fueled by anger, resentment, even sometimes self-pity or self-loathing, self-laceration. And I have enough distance on myself. I've been in very intensive therapy the last 5 years, so I've learned how to analyze it, to do what I call take out my sewing kit and bind up those wounds and see to a degree what I'm doing if I'm feeling this woundedness. I do think it's the core of my argument about Trump. What Trump does, he takes, and I know you've heard me say this a zillion times, but it's increasingly relevant. He takes up those wounds, and instead of, I mean, he's not a therapeutic guy. Instead of binding those wounds into some kind of therapeutic bromide, which is sort of Kamala-esque or Obama-esque, or Michelle-esque, or certainly Terry Gross-esque, he takes those wounds and rather brilliantly and very maliciously and very effectively turns the wounds into Ubermensch. He turns it into power, venom, wrestling, revenge, demonization. And like, for instance, that line is really crucial where he mentions Anderson Cooper. I think he called him Allison Cooper on purpose. Everybody knows Anderson Cooper is gay, and Anderson Cooper came out when it was safe to come out, and there was nothing brave about it. Everybody knew he was gay, and he had a partner and adopted a kid or something, and that it's like, oh, he's so brave, he came out. It was like part of his branding. But that Anderson Cooper, I just thought that was such a good tell when Trump says, quite purposely called him, I think, Allison Cooper, making a quote joke about that Anderson Cooper isn't, quote, a real man, he's a gay man, and blah blah blah. And so that really does support your point and my thing about the woundedness. And I think the thing I always my go-to move is that's where the lack and excess are so powerful. He makes sure that he accesses in himself and in the audience his and their own woundedness. Either you've been wokeified into being a gelding, or you've lost your job, or the Democrats hate you, or you're not a real man, or your wife got trans surgery, or your kid got lap band surgery, or whatever the thing is. And then he accesses that lack, like, I'm fine down there, that my hands are fine, aren't these hands beautiful, blah blah blah. And then it's crucial to manifest the lack, so everybody can feel the lack. Then he quite powerfully pivots in virtually every rhetorical move. Then he finds excess, and he takes the wound and transforms it into the bow of political galvanized energy. And that it's like, whose ever fault it is, whether obviously immigrants or woke people or the media or academics or people who are gay or trans or whatever. And it just, if you're not like I'm such a great scholar or anything, I'm just following my nerve endings. But if you can't read through what Trump's doing, it works because it's like a magic pill. It's like, yeah, it's not my fault. It's their fault. And that's the magic pill, I think. That's what he does.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say this. There's a guy who has been on the show a couple of times, Ed Watts, who's written a great book called Mortal Republic, and he looks at the sort of decline of the Roman Republic into authoritarianism, into just the decline of the republic into a dictatorship.
Right.
And he says it's always norms, it's not laws. But then he says that this. He's got the kind of he chronicles these make Rome great again restorationist figures. And he says the problem is you really need scapegoats to do this. There's always got to be somebody.
That's the word. That's the key word.
That made it not great. There's got to be a group. There's got to be a group of, and he in ancient Rome he says oftentimes violently, right? I mean, it winds up quite violent. But this is it, right? There has to be some kind of group that America at one point had to be great, or the Roman Republic had to be great, and then these people kind of contaminated it.
Yeah.
And now the rectification has to happen. And yeah, like I love in Seinfeld, there's that great line, Festivus, the airing of the grievances. Now comes it, but that's it, right? There's the airing of the grievances.
What's the line? Festive is the airing of the grievances.
It's Festivus. George Costanza's father comes up with a holiday. It's Festivus for the rest of us. And then one of the holiday traditions of this new holiday is going to be airing of grievances.
I love it.
So you sit down at the dinner table like a Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner, and you tell everybody how they disappointed you and made you angry, and that's part of
it's beautiful. Like there's a wonderful line by Lily Tomlin who says language was invented because of the deep human need to complain. I just love that. And that's what Trump, he accesses the complaint and then he does? He transfers it into a leveraged power, whereas, like I'm a personal essayist. I take something I'm worried about, like race or sex or mortality or war photography or celebrity culture, and I sort of access what upsets me about it. And then for better or worse, I explore how I am guilty of the issue. And then I try to make a claim that it has cultural and even broadly anthropological meaning. So in a way, like Trump, I access my own nerve endings and I access what's fucked up about me. And then if my work is any good, which I have to believe it is, it's not about me and my dumb little feelings. It's about trying to get to something culturally resonant and humanly timeless. And that's a rather grand claim for my work, but that's what the essayist tries to do from from Aquinas to, Joan Didion. That's what the essayist does. And so to me as an essayist, it's really instructive what Trump does. He accesses what's fucked up in himself, whether his hands are too small, or he has a small dick, or he fucked a porn star and she said he's not very well hung, or his hand, whatever the thing is. I mean, he eats junk food and that he's dying, and I mean these are just the most superficial things, but I think he's a utterly unhappy human being. I don't think he slept with his wife for 15 years. I'd be shocked. But in any case, he does the opposite thing of what an essayist does. He starts in the right way, and then he just then points the blame outward. And that's just weird. Like it'd be as if I said, well, there's this thing called, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example of like some book of mine. I mean, that the viewers may or may not know, but like it'd be like this book I did, which I sort of like, called Black Planet Facing Race During NBA Season, in which I try to explore how the NBA operates as a funhouse mirror in which race relations get shown back as parody to the audience. And in the book, I think what is good about the book is that I try to own some of my racism. Like, I'm a white person, a middle-class person, and I try to explore how fucked up that is. And I think if the book is good, it's because I'm pretty honest about it. And it would be as if I wrote that book and said, well, of course, I'm not racist. All you out there are totally racist. I'm this totally enlightened person. Or if I said, oh, it's very good to be racist, yay for white people. But that I tend to occupy this very gray space in my work, for better or worse. And I do think a key to Trump is the way he provides in a world. This is what Adam Curtis is so good at, this filmmaker that you and I like. In a world that's utterly, utterly confusing, Trump, in a WWE way, does offer just a clear way out. I've got the answers, which, as you would say, is extremely Christian.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, but I love what you're saying is at the moment it gets close to the therapeutic in the sense of it gets at the gaping wound, right? And then
Totally.
look away from the gaping wound, right? Like narcotics, like anesthetize the gaping wound. So it is, I mean, which is very interesting when people say, well, Trump's authentic. And I think, no, he's performative. I mean, it's
performatively authentic.
Different. Yeah,
that's
right.
Really
performatively
great.
Authentic. Yes, he's performatively authentic. But I think you're right that he's inviting us into his own unrest, right? His own dissatisfaction.
Yeah. That's the cool move. That's the gutsy thing.
Vicariously, you can, like what you're saying, I think vicariously, you can delude yourself. You can fool yourself. You can look away from your own existential crises. You can look away from the pain. You can look away. And he can be the cipher and the narcotic for you to escape. And so you're escaping together. And that's the transactional mystery, right? This is almost like sacramental, right? I mean,
that's beautiful. And look at the McDonald's. I think it's brilliant that they posted the McDonald's burgers on the, the, whatever it's called, Trump plane or whatever, the presidential plane or the pre-presidential plane. And it's like I swear to God, I swear McDonald's purchases probably will go up over the next 8 hours.
Of course.
Because it's sort of like, okay, like, I don't feel guilty. I'm going to eat it. The president's eat it. He made it to 78. And I'm going to eat it, I think we're getting to some interesting. Now, is anybody watching this, Scott, or no?
They are. People have been in and out. People have been in and out. And of course, this will go.
Is there any chance we can send it? Do you make a video of it? Is there a way I can share it?
I can. I will send you all the links tonight.
Because I feel like I have to leave at 5 o'clock on the West Coast, 8 o'clock on the East Coast. I feel like this is, I don't know if I'm amped up on coffee or what, but I just feel like we got to some good stuff.
We've said it all. We've begun to say things.
What can we say crucially, Scott, in the last 2 minutes? Is there anything I said you'd want to push back hard against?
No, I don't think so. I mean, we could tell listeners to buy the book. A Christian existentialist and a psychoanalytic atheist walk into a Trump rally. By How We Got Here.
You're on
the by How We Got Here on the byline. And this is it's interesting because I do think the gem that I've taken away from this conversation was the admission of the perverse pleasure in the shit show. I mean, that to me, the fact that
it tells the whole election. And James is like super left. And, he and I did our movie on Marshawn Lynch. We did How We Got Here together. We're working on I just thought, in a way, I felt like I could have said that, but James said it first. And I found myself just 100% agreeing. But the reason it's interesting is because it explains the election in about 7 words. It just does. People voted for entertainment because it's fun. It's fun
absolutely.
To watch them have a McDonald's on, the QE2 or whatever it was. Kamala Harris is she's like the worst of Biden, Obama, and Hillary rolled into one. I mean, if she ever had an authentic laugh or smile, I would fall out of my chair. I mean, she is just I mean, she's like, I don't know. If we said Trump is performatively authentic, she's authentically performative. I mean, there
Right,
is
right.
not a real bone in that person's body, at least in public. Like, even to me, this was a key line. And they said, "What's your favorite swear word? Do you know this thing?" And she said, she wanted to say motherfucker, but she couldn't say it. Whereas Trump would have just said it. And she goes,
Oh
"Well,
yeah,
I can."
absolutely.
She said, "Well, it starts with an M and it ends with an A, but I can't say it. But I think Biden keeps me around because I'm the only person who can say it right, i.e., she can give it the right inflection with an A at the end rather than an ER, as if every 9-year-old kid in Omaha, Nebraska can't do that." And that basically, by not saying it, she gave the whole game away. You got to say it. You
Yeah.
got to be on the garbage can. You got to be at McDonald's. When are the Democrats going to get it? Are they ever going to get it that you say motherfucker? You don't say M-A. That doesn't do it. It's
No.
performance. I could just kill them.
The
Have they
answer is
not
no.
ever
They're not going to
have
get it.
they
They're
not
not going
ever
to get it.
taken a theater class? I mean, it's
No.
just unbelievable. It's unbelievable to me. But anyway, that's a good place to end.
This
Catch
has
you
been
later,
fantastic.
motherfucker. Okay.
Bye now.
Bye, Scott. I'll see you.
Okay, I'm ending.